my name's George McDonaugh, and I'm CEO of a company called KR1 PLC, formerly Kryptonite 1. We're one of the first, if not the first, institutions set up specifically to invest in tokens. We were listed from day one, so we have a public share that people can buy on one of the London stock exchanges, and if we choose our projects properly and get a good basket of tokens and they do well, our share price will do well. So it's a kind of proxy way of getting access to the crypto economy via a publicly listed share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And how did you first get involved in the blockchain world?
So I was very lucky. I came across Bitcoin in 2011 and pretty much jacked in my job and decided to go off onto the road and do whatever Bitcoin would let me do. I basically fell in love with the technology, and so I've been part of the London scene for a long time. I ran meetups, I advocated the technology, I've done a lot of public speaking about it, and eventually the opportunity arose to head up this very, very small, young, publicly listed company that was going to take on a little chunk of investment to have a look at this ICO, and this was in early 2016, so way before the ICO wasn't even a word. There'd been 2 public crowd sales when we started, so we were right at the very beginning, and so I've been very, very lucky to, I guess, be what they call an allocator. I allocate capital to young blockchain-based projects that are pushing the decentralization, the world of decentralization and open source applications.
So you said that you quit your job and you fell in love with the technology. Was that a hard decision? Like, tell us the story of how that came about.
I'll be honest, I had no choice really, because I wasn't doing any work. I was in advertising. I made TV ads for a living, so I was and I just couldn't continue to do anything but try and pack as much understanding of Bitcoin into my head as possible. So let's just say the ads were no longer flowing, and various situations in my life kind of came together into a head, and I was like, right, I'm just going to go, and the idea was to go and brand Bitcoin businesses, give them logos, slogans, that kind of thing. There just weren't that many. My sense of how long technology takes to permeate was very naive, and I thought that when I first discovered Bitcoin, I figured I've missed the boat, but that was 2011. So, it actually takes a lot longer for this stuff to happen. So, as I learned about the technology more and more, Litecoin was invented, and we had this whole Cambrian explosion of young tokens that were effectively copying Bitcoin, but they twiddled the dials in various ways, so different block times, different algorithms, that kind of thing. And I just got fascinated in all of that. And then, so I went full time, as it were, and I've just been advocating the technology ever since, basically.
So how did you first get interested in technology? Like when you were a child or something, was there a particular game or a particular computer?
So I mean, I guess I was always into computer games to some degree. I had all the usual, Mega Drive, Nintendo, all of that stuff. But I'm not entirely sure what it was. I think I was going through a fairly libertarian phase at the time. I'm a fairly vocal atheist, and I think when I understood that there was a system in place where you could send money across the world, across borders, without permission. Not that I was particularly well versed in monetary, the geopolitical monetary world and all of that, but it felt like something that was massively important. And the more I learned, the deeper down the rabbit hole I went, the less likely I was to come back out again. And I think here, what am I, 7 years later, still here. trying to find wherever this wonderful road will lead. And it has been an amazing journey. So not especially technical background. I love games and stuff, but it was more the power of the technology that grabbed my imagination, and I've been, as I say, following it ever since.
So how do you see the future of blockchain and cryptocurrency progressing?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think the power of open source development with this new layer of monetization on it is really powerful. I think because to some degree some of these applications can be seen as public services, and because they're open source, if you create a system that provides a service to people and there is very, very little in the way of rent seeking, and it gets the network effect, I find it very hard to work out how that system gets competed against. In the world of closed source applications, it's whoever's got the best code, right? Facebook, MySpace, Bebo. You've got better code, your community grows, you get the network effect, away you go. But in a world of open source applications on something like Ethereum, it's possible to see a world in the future where you have community-owned projects that have no rent-seeking, no middleman, that become the de facto service providers for whatever that is, whether it's computational file storage or whatever. And from a capital investment perspective, from a VC perspective, that's massively exciting, because you could be investing in the last projects, like in the last companies, So I see a future where open source applications permeate globally and become incredibly powerful, and hence why tokens have value. Tokens are powerful if they're the central element to that service. So and I think Bitcoin will continue to grow in adoption and use. I would say though that the big thing down the road that I feel like we're in a little bit of a collision course with is what we call the legacy world, the regulatory world, the state actor world, and how we interact with the power of open source, permissionless infrastructure when it hits a world that doesn't understand open source permissionless infrastructure, and that's going to be exciting to watch.
So hypothetically, who do you think Satoshi Nakamoto is, and what does he look like?
That's a great question. I don't know. There have been so many different theories as to who he is and who they are, maybe. I was a bit of a believer for a while that it came from a group of people, but then beginning to understand humans as they are, the idea that a group of people could keep a secret for this long with this much money involved is probably unlikely. I think it's got something to do with Hal Finney. It's got something to do with Nick Szabo, and potentially somewhere close by Craig Wright. I mean, he can place himself pretty close to ground zero, but I don't think it's him. And then potentially this Kleinman fellow, something amongst that group spawned this thing, and I don't really feel like I need to know exactly. I'd like to know, but it is what it is because we don't know, right? So let it continue to be a mystery, I think.
Makes sense. So what advice would you give to somebody starting out in this industry?
So there's way too much noise in this industry. As soon as were you to Google, cryptocurrency investing, you're at the top of a very difficult chasm to navigate. So if you want to, my advice would be if you want to learn, find someone like Vitalik or Vlad Zamfir or sort of, if you're interested in Bitcoin, some of the Blockstream guys on Twitter, and see who they're following, and try and curate a Twitter feed of people where the info to noise ratio is very, very good, and just curate yourself a Twitter feed of people who are doing it right. They're not shilling coins, they're not doing any of that, mostly developers, and then listen to what they're saying and learn as you go. But it's really important to try and find quality people who know what they're talking about, because as soon as you're watching YouTubers shill stuff around the clock, it's very, very hard to actually get a sense of what's real and what's not, and what's important and what isn't. So that might be a good way to start.
Okay, perfect. So just to finish off, I've got
Sure.
a few fun questions.
Okay.
So what did you want to do when you were a kid?
What did I want to do when I was a kid? It's a good question. I'd probably policeman, fireman, the run-of-the-mill kind of stuff that kids think is exciting. But yeah.
So do you drive a car at the moment, or what's your dream car?
I do drive a car. I look slightly ridiculous in it. It's a tiny little two-seater Porsche, and I'm a very big guy, so I look fairly odd in it. But I have a family car for my wife and kids to go around in, so depends what day you catch me. But yeah, a bit of a petrol head.
What would be your ideal car to drive?
Okay, well, there's some big questions there. I'd like something beautiful and old and amazing, like an old DB5 or something. An Aston Martin 1981 Vantage V8 would be very nice. And then in the more modern world, I guess a Nissan GTR Nismo would be pretty cool to drive around the track. Yeah, and maybe a nice new Targa 911, pretty good looking piece of kit.
What's your favourite place in the world?
Oh wow, favourite place in the world is probably a relation of mine's house in Scotland in the Highlands, which is very beautiful, and I've been going there since I was a little kid. So I'd say about 40 minutes west of Inverness.
What would you miss most if you couldn't have it anymore?
What would I miss most if I couldn't have that place anymore?
It doesn't have to be a place, it can be anything.
What would I miss most in the world? A boring answer would be my wife and kids, wouldn't it? Really? I mean, if I was to miss anything, I miss them.